Welcome, everyone. Today we have Karen with us, and I've been genuinely awestruck by her work. She brings together creativity, science, and technology in a way that feels deeply human. With a strong background in music, which she practices herself, she has woven sound into healthcare, neuroscience, and AI. At UCSF, she is a faculty member working across healthcare, aging, and um,
Otolaryngology, hearing sciences.
leading research at Research of Sound Care and Technology. And for those of you who are wondering why we're smiling or laughing, it's because I messed up. I didn't hit the record button earlier, so we had to do the intro again. And with this, once again, ma'am, the mic is yours.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that intro, Manan. I'm very happy to be here today and talk to you about a recent grant that we have. So, as Manan said, I am a auditory neuroscientist. I work in the hearing science fields, and we know that cochlear implants are remarkable devices in that they're these prosthetic devices that surgeons insert into your cochlea, and it allows you to regain your sense of hearing if you have been deaf. But much of this is really remarkable because it's, to go from being completely deaf to being able to hear is amazing. And we've found that speech recognition in quiet is particularly amazing when you use these cochlear implants. But while these are really remarkable devices and have been considered miracles for a lot of patients, they're not very good at things like noise or other sort of complex situations. And the reason for that is that there are 12 to 22 electrodes of the cochlear implant that contact your cochlea, and those are trying to act as a replacement for the thousands of inner hair cells that you would normally have to help you hear. And so there's a lot of technological limitations of a cochlear implant. It's going to be a degraded auditory input compared to your normal ear. And so what this happens is this makes it very difficult to do something known as the cocktail party effect. So the cocktail party effect is that feeling when you're in a busy restaurant or you're at a party or whatever, and there's so many different sounds going around you that it's hard to focus on the person who's talking to you with all the background noise, right? That's the idea of using spatial segregation in your ears to help you focus on the sound that you need to. And you can imagine with a cochlear implant, because they have this degraded input, selective attention is really, really difficult in these noisy environments. If it's hard for normal individuals, it's even harder for someone with hearing loss and who's using a cochlear implant. So, given the influx of AI innovation right now, we had this opportunity to apply for a UCSF Chancellor's Award. It was called the 2025 Carroll Innovation Award. And we wanted to see whether we could leverage AI so that CI devices can focus on a particular speaker or talker while disregarding background noise and babble. So, as you can see by this thing, imagine that all of this is your auditory input coming into your cochlear implant, but you want to kind of pull out a particular speaker or sentence. So in other words, we're trying to use AI to selectively hear a target voice among many and enhancing that one while reducing the background noise. Now, eventually, the large goal is to design a platform agnostic tool so it works across multiple CI manufacturers and models because patients have many different types of different cochlear implants that they get, and we want this to work with all sorts of different cochlear implants. Now, this particular pilot award from UCSF is for what they called high-risk, high-reward research that might not be funded by traditional mechanisms like the NIH, but that we could hopefully use this small little pilot grant to start getting some preliminary evidence to apply for larger funding awards later. So to kind of tell you our basic approach, we're very much at the beginning of this process. We just got this grant in October, but our idea is that first we're going to do is ID some audio filters that can identify a speaker and isolate that speaker within noisy environments. So there's a lot of proprietary things like this, but we're trying to shortlist a candidate of models that are open source that might be usable for us. So these might include things like voice filter and brain speech. There's already existing algorithms and voice filters that can isolate a speaker and pull it out. Then our next step is that we're going to train a deep learning model on a database of recorded babble and preferred voices. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have pre-trained models of 5 to 10 minutes of high quality audio per speaker. So let's say that I was the cochlear implant user, I'd have my husband and my son and my assistant or whatever speak in and say certain stock phrases. We would take those recordings and then we can also then feed it into the model. And if we can't get enough voice recordings, the great thing is that there's a lot of synthetic voice data tools out there like Descript, which can make a voice clone. But it shouldn't be too hard to get this data through like voice memo and just 5 to 10 minutes of each speaker speaking into that. We also, if we need extra babble, the great thing is a lot of the CI outcome measures that we use in the clinic have a lot of babble, which is also something that we can use. And then once we know how long it takes for us to train the model, the computational requirements, etc., we're going to then begin prototyping an application framework and mockups. So that doesn't mean that we're going to build the whole thing. It's just that we want to start at least having the parameters to know what we might need to do. And then that will help us give us the technical expertise and the budget plan that will allow us to do full-scale development where we would apply for a much larger grant from the NIH, NSF, things like that. Now, why this actually matters is because understanding speech in noisy environments is actually one of the biggest unmet needs in CI users. The motivation for this particular project came from a conversation I had with Guy Kawasaki. So if you don't know who Guy Kawasaki is, he's this Silicon Valley Canva evangelist. He's a big startup guy here in Silicon Valley, but he also happens to be a CI user. So I met him actually at a UCSF innovation talk where he was telling us how to do pitches, but he'd mentioned something about how he was struggling on a call, like something like this, because of his cochlear implant. So essentially I contacted him and just wanted to know more about what his experience was using the cochlear implant since we study sound perception. And he said, you know, Karen, I really, really wish that I could go to a restaurant and when I'm with my family, just really focus on my wife or my daughter and, not maybe kind of blur the background. And she goes, look, I know it's a little problematic sometimes to blur the background, but for someone like me, it would be very helpful to be able to focus on my wife's voice or my daughter's voice because I'm really struggling. And Guy Kawasaki is actually what we would call a super user. He's someone that's, very good about using his device, going to his follow-up appointments, things like that. And even he's struggling with this. So because he was struggling with this, I thought, okay, that's completely understandable. This is like a social thing that happens to you on a daily basis. Let's see if we can do anything. And, for me, this was also personally important because I actually studied the cocktail party effect during my PhD dissertation. So as Manan talked about, I am a musician and a neuroscientist, and I was always really fascinated by how our brain can take in multiple lines of music, say in like a Bach fugue or things like that, and yet somehow track everything, even though we know there are human limitations to attention. So in many ways, doing something like this, that you could think of Baroque counterpoint or polyphony, what I was studying as like a musical version of the cocktail party effect. And now we're actually focusing on the real cocktail party effect. And it's really exciting because this, like I said, has been one of the huge challenges in cognitive science for as long as we can remember. But now that we have AI being more available and more accessible, so it feels like a really good time to try to start tackling this problem. Now, as I talked with Guy, he was like, this would definitely help CI users. As a CI user, this is what I want. But the fact is, this is actually going to help a lot of other use cases too. So for example, it could help people who use hearing aids, or it could even help the normal hearing listener who's using Bluetooth or AirPods or that sort of thing. So the idea is that this would be something that's particularly helpful for cochlear implant users, but could also scale to other use cases. And so really, this is setting the groundwork for scalable, inclusive auditory tools. And I think this is very important because currently, at least right now, cochlear implant users, there's been over 1 million people in the world who have been implanted with cochlear implants. And it is considered a hearing disability. And a lot of your quality of life really matters when you can't hear your social environment or you're having a hard time navigating a complex real world environment. So I just want to thank you all so much for your attention for this quick lightning talk as I told you about what we're studying. This is a group project and I'm working with Nicole Jim, who's my collaborator on this call. She's a cochlear implant surgeon. I'm also working with Pat Pongjira-Dejfong, who is our data analyst and engineer. I also am working with Max Jim and Ruben Sarwa, who are our AI engineers as well. And yeah, this is just starting to get started, so I just wanted to give you a walkthrough of what we're planning to do. If any of you do know any cochlear implant users, please go ahead and contact us. Brooke Berry is our research assistant for our lab, and we have several ongoing studies, including this one, that cochlear implant users can participate in, even if they're not in the Bay Area or at UCSF. So that's it. Thank you very much again. Thank you, Manan and everyone, and Saima for inviting me here.
Thank you so much. And with that, Keith, it's yours. And then after that,
all right.
it's David.
So this is an exciting area for me, and it's kind of personal for me, not because I'm a cochlear implant user, but for another reason I'll get to. You are attempting, I think, to address a deeper problem, separate from cochlear implants. First of all, I just want to say at the beginning, what you're doing is using machine learning to address a pre-processing problem to augment or replace a pre-processing problem in the brain. So I just want to make that clear because when you talk about AI, people go off in different directions. This is a machine learning, and there is a neural network piece in your brain that pre-processes sound to extract to bias it towards speech, and that's what you're addressing here. Now, there's a whole population of us out there in which that particular circuit doesn't work very well. Independent of my hearing is just fine, but I cannot pick out speech in a noisy environment. And I think there's a population of us. So this is personal for me in that regard. I mean, the cochlear implant is the way you go about, if your instrument is the way you go about applying it, that's just a vehicle. But what you're really doing here is understanding a piece of the way the brain processes sound to extract speech, biased towards, towards speech, that I think there's a population of people for whom that doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us, even if you have good normal hearing, I think this is a cognitive issue too, because it's about attention. It's about your ability to spatially filter. And, it's basically an overload to your system. It's like sensory overstimulation with you trying to focus on something. So yes, absolutely.
But can I ask you, are you focusing on, so there's two things. One is figuring out what's the background and what's the foreground. That's one level. But there's another thing, and I don't know if you're really looking at it, which is regardless of the background foreground separation, actually picking out speech from sound and biasing the signal towards speech.
Yeah.
And that's a different problem. And I'm wondering if you're trying to address that.
We are. So right now we're focusing on the speech and not just all noise. So a lot of the cochlear implants actually have, many of them have enough processing that they already suppress things. So let's say you are a cochlear implant user sitting next to a fan, for example, so just like not speech, but the humming, they have algorithms already within the cochlear implant processors that will try to turn that kind of noise down. But when you put that, let's say we call this environmental noise along with the speech, is just completely overwhelming to a cochlear implant user. So right now we plan to focus on speech. But, as I said, that's mostly because there's three major manufacturers of cochlear implants, Medel, Advanced Bionics, and Cochlear, and they all have their own internal processing that tries to help with noise suppression too. But yeah, okay. Good point. Thank you, Keith.
I just want one last comment, which is I think when you get to the point of actually trying to enhance speech, you're going to find that it may actually be an AI problem because you've got to pick out a phenomenon that isn't real from the sound, and your brain knows how to do it.
Yep.
And sometimes that doesn't work. So it's a very different problem. If you're interested in talking some more about that at some point, I'd be happy to do that. But it's an interesting problem that's a little different from what you described.
I'm coming over. I'll get you guys together for coffee. Meanwhile, I'll move the mic to David.
Yeah, I'll shut up.
No, man. I'm really looking forward to that coffee. So
Karen, I could go forever before my life in AI. Audio DSP processing, did my auditory scene analysis with Al Bregman. I sat next to Poppy Crum at the CTA.
I love it, David. Albert Bregman was my hero. Poppy
was in her undergrad when I was in grad school at McGill with Bruce Pennycook, who's a Karma grad. Consumer market. So we have a 1 million parameter model doing speech extraction for a TV. Right. We programmed it for generic use case of television signal. How do I pull the voice out of vuvuzela? How do I separate dialogue from, say, Gregorian chant or singing? So to Keith's point, I think isolating dialogue, not hard. Done, 1 million parameter network, I can put it in a TV. The challenge I think that's interesting is I've got a big personal problem with cocktail party problem. Anyone with any microphone basically has a problem with the cocktail party problem. So I noticed from a discrimination perspective, I've always looked at it like, hey, I want glasses. I'm looking at the target. So I'm already getting some natural beam forming. And then if you saw the Google work where they used cameras to essentially track lip sync and use lip guiding to guide the discrimination. So the person I'm looking at, we naturally look at the person we want to hear and heavily leveraging that to do. So that to me is kind of interesting. It sounds like you're training on known voices so that the discrimination will be better for a spouse. Children doesn't solve Guy Kawasaki going to a networking event.
Yeah, no,
And so I'm curious on that, and then also the CI specific elements
mhm.
versus any hearing assistive device.
Yes, that's a great point. And David, your background is so amazing because, like, I love Poppy, I love Albert Bregman, like all these people I cited for my dissertation. So yes, very good point.
Okay.
So something I couldn't fit into this talk is I've been involved in the cochlear implant community, and we've been talking about other currently rising technological innovations that are helping cochlear implant users. And one of them is, David, you say glasses. We definitely process so much visual information. In fact, a lot of our cochlear implant users are very good lip readers. In addition to the glasses and actually looking at people, which is, we kind of think this will be done, in concert with something else. The idea, of course, is that, you can leverage various technologies, right? So for example, Facebook's and Meta's new smart glasses have captioning, right? So imagine if you combine captioning along with something that helps you. And like right now, Guy Kawasaki was telling me he has a phone hack and he can like point it at the person he wants, and that helps. But, it just feels like this is kind of, and maybe this is more, like I said, this is very beginning work, and I'm sure a lot of problems are going to come up as we do it, hence the high risk, high reward. We don't even know, Guy and I were like, is this even possible? I'm like, I don't know. We should just try and see, and if it doesn't, we'll pivot. We don't know if it's possible. We don't know what problems, we don't even know what we don't know yet, like what problems are going to come up. And so we're totally entering this entire project with a lot of humbleness because honestly, for me, I'm new. I don't study machine learning. I don't study AI. My background is in cognitive science and, music cognition and the brain. So I'm thinking of this from a proof of concept, from a cognitive science perspective, but I don't even know all the issues that we will run into yet.
We should connect offline. I can connect you with the researchers who built our consumer product, because what I can tell you is the audio science piece turned out to be the easy part. And trying to make an optimized ML model that fit on device and work. Like, so for example, you talked about synthetic. So we're using 11 labs and audio generators to essentially, a movie will not work. And you can't license that movie. So you have to emulate that use case and add it to your training set, enough variations. You want to support multilingual, you want to support male, female, range of voices.
Age, everything.
So you keep building the training set, playing a game of whack-a-mole, but you got to fit it on the processor in the device. And so you're going to build a beautiful big model, and then someone's going to go, it's 20 times too big.
Yeah, and that's kind of why right now the big thing that I talked about with Guy, I was like, I don't know that this might be too much processing power needed for it to, work. He goes, we could, so right now we proposed a phone app, or actually more likely a cloud-based app. But it's like, this is so much information to take in. I'm not sure that we are actually there to do it yet, but we're going to try, right? We're going to start seeing, what is something we could start doing, and like, I kind of think of it as several discrete programs. And, if we still have one, and okay, we kind of figure that out, then can we work maybe with the manufacturers? Because they have, Medel, Cochlear, and Advanced Bionics all have a lot of in-house processing that they're doing too. So the idea is kind of like, we're all trying to attack this from different things. Maybe we're not quite there yet. Maybe we're not quite ready. Let's try it. And yes, David, Keith, I would love to talk because, like I said, I come from the cognitive neuroscience perspective, and this is something I cooked up with Guy, but we don't know. We're trying. It's a little bit of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what happens, which is why I really liked the high risk, high reward kind of idea, because it's not, a lot, we don't have preliminary data. We haven't studied, but we're just going to try it. So yes, absolutely. But David, that sounds awesome.
We'll connect you over email.
Yeah, I'll throw one more thing. Classical post-processing sometimes makes the AI worse.
Okay, good to know. So, we haven't gotten to that point with all the audio recordings yet. So yeah, okay, good to know. Yeah, we were trying to even just think about like, how will we get these recordings? Is voice, we've decided we're going to use phone, like voice memos, but we'll see, like, is that high quality enough? And, a lot of cochlear implant users struggle with hearing on the phone too. So this is a lot of things that we're going to try out.
Yeah, now you're going to get into your training on a specific mic. And the cochlear implant doesn't have a mic per se. So you need to emulate what the sound signal hitting is. Go down a huge rabbit hole. So
and that's why something we were talking about with Guy, he's like, maybe we can work on cloning voices. So this is a lot of stuff that's still under discussion.
I'd say there's a big group of people who are already looking at this from a consumer device perspective. It's probably a good start.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much, David. That's exactly the kind of info I want. And then see if we can do this in a healthcare kind of context. Perfect.
Albert, all yours.
David really covered like a lot of what I was going to ask. The very last thing you mentioned, which like this is not my field at all, so it just kind of off the cusp. But just thinking of like Google Meet and even Zoom, like
Mhm.
I've noticed a huge difference of like isolating the speaker in a meeting from background noise. So it seems like there's probably quite a bit of work that's already been done. So that was like my first sort of question. Like, how does previous work inform this work? Because again, my understanding, my limited understanding is that like signal processing, it's a pretty well established field. It's not necessarily machine learning. And then the second one was just like operationally the thing that is kind of missing, which I was curious about. Again, what David focused on was what is the target? And so like there's a simplistic kind of way to think about it, which is who's the closest speaker.
Mhm.
And but then really how we as human beings sort of operationalize, or the framework we use is visual,
Mhm.
um, perceptual. So like who we're looking at, which again, David focused on that. So what how have you guys thought about operationalizing the target?
I think we haven't quite gotten to that part. I kind of, in my mind, a priori, kind of assumed it would be the people, like, let's say you're sitting at a table, it will be the people closest to you. And so, and in Guy's case, he was like, you are very familiar with your wife's voice, your daughter's voice, your son's voice, you're just enhancing. But, so that's just off the cuff. That's kind of, yes, we were kind of thinking proximity makes a difference. Like, I don't think we care so much about the person at the other end of the restaurant talking unless they're saying, hey guy, and it's your daughter. But I think the idea is to start with the case of us all kind of being clustered together around the table. And even that's something I struggle with. I can be sitting next to my husband looking at him and still be, and like, for example, right now I have a cold, so I'm looking at all of you, but I'm actually struggling to hear what you're saying because my ears are congested, right? So I think we're going to start with the people who are closest to us. And then Albert, you bring a very good point. I didn't, part of this project is also, I didn't mention, is that we're doing a field scan. Like, I have seen there's a lot of proprietary, Pico Voice, there's a lot of proprietary things out there that are doing this. The only thing is that I don't, with the cochlear implant manufacturers and how healthcare and insurance works, we don't really think we can use proprietary things. As an academic researcher, we're kind of biased towards wanting to do something open source and something that, the three companies can use, the three major companies that do cochlear implant users. So, I think that's definitely part of it. Like and it may be as we start doing this that we're like, what, the existing research open source ones are not great. We want to just partner with a consumer thing and let's tailor it for cochlear implant users by bringing them into discussions with MED-EL, Advanced Bionics, Cochlear, et cetera. So that's a really good point. And yes, we're very aware that, even in sound engineering, yes, the sound processing part has been written about in papers. Like, there are already like, things that are existing. It's just a matter of trying to find a way to make this work with the CI manufacturers. And they keep updating their technology as well, right? So like, the thing that's hard is like, let's say the cochlear implants first started, I would want to say like in the last 50 years. So you could theoretically have a much older CI user, someone who got implanted quite early, who's using a cochlear implant and technology that was older than, a kid who just got implanted yesterday by MED-EL. And the idea is like, we're going to hopefully help everybody, but, generally we don't tend to re-implant someone. Like, as if your cochlear implant is working, you're not going to do a second surgery. You're going to try to do that. You're going to try to update their process and try to make it work. But yes, because there are things that are innovation, we as researchers are constantly looking at like, which device do you have, which processor do you have, because it's a changing landscape. So yes, these are all good points.
Yeah, so follow-up question. Like I know nothing about cochlear implants, but and it sounds like you're right. Like to implement it on current users, you want some sort of like maybe outside software adaptation, maybe. But like, is there like instead of like using glasses, like is there a way to like maybe um like with like a directional, there's a way to like know the direction that
Mhm.
your head's looking at, and so you
Yeah,
could like use that as an isolation sort of
yeah,
framework.
Can I add a point to that? Like, I noticed that it's usually just one implant and not two, and maybe like
You,
how you're turning your head with two of them could localize
yeah,
the correction for
so
you.
there
Yeah.
are both unilateral and bilateral cochlear implant users. And then there's another use case, which is very unique, which is single-sided deafness. That's something Nicole is starting. So single-sided deafness means you have one cochlear implant and the other ear is completely good. So there's, even among CI users, this is going to be, challenging. I think with bilateral cochlear implant users, yes, they'll probably do the position. And, we haven't quite gotten to the whole positional element, although that's something CI users just kind of have found their own compensatory strategies to make things work. Like I said, guy turning and using his phone eye, just pointing it at people, leaning in, that sort of thing. But we are going to try to, we will have to think about all these different cases. I think single-sided deafness is a new category that was just designated by the FDA in 2019. So I think we won't probably start with them. We'll probably start with unilateral or bilateral cochlear implant users. So a single cochlear implant or two implants. And in all honesty, we will probably start with what we consider good performers. So there's a lot of cochlear implant users who go through the surgery and everything, but then maybe don't use their device or don't go to their audiology follow. And in that 1 year post-surgery, they're supposed to go see their audiologist for tune-ups, because you're trying to, it's essentially a case of neuroplasticity where you're trying to adapt to this electric hearing, right? And so they're supposed to go to the audiology to get tune-ups, to keep changing things, change with programming and things like that. But not everyone is. Some people, maybe we don't really know why some people don't use it and others do. But there are basically super performers in cochlear implant users, and some that fall off the track and be like, I don't want to wear my cochlear implant. I don't like it, and they never adjust to using it. And it does take a lot of work to adjust to a cochlear implant. So in all honesty, we're probably going to start with like the good users, just to like make it easier, and then have to find a way to like generalize. So, yeah.
How are you going to evaluate performance? Do you have a sufficient hearing model, or you have a emulator for the CI?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, what we plan on doing them is putting them through the same outcome measures they would go through audiology testing. So we have the HINT test battery and the CNC and AZ Bio. And specifically, AZ Bio and HINT are hearing sentences and noise and hearing words and noise. So these are things that they get scored on and are validated measures in hearing science. So we're literally going, and they tend to be collected at audiology appointments generally. So that is actually, we're going to try it and see like, hey, did it actually functionally change things and standardize hearing science outcomes that we use?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
everyone.
This
Thank
was
you.
Wrapping this
amazing.
up.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.